So this week we're going to talk about HTML and code, and you might be a little scared, like people in the beginning start screaming looking at math, but really I can put you at ease here. HTML is relatively easy to understand. It's sort of visual. It's not a code like Java or Python or Ruby, something you look at and you can't figure it out at all. It's pretty obvious. Some of you already know HTML, but it's always a good idea to go back to kind of really learn it from scratch to know how to organize it and how to make start a very clean coding. In the beginning, I see many people just copy pasting and messing things and not really organizing their documents very neatly. But in the long run, it's going to be really helpful for you to organize things so you can see what's nested in what's inside each other to make it very easy later on to go back to your HTML document and look at it and immediately understand what's going on. But really, I can put you at ease. It's less scary than you think. And before I start giving you, like throwing a whole bunch of HTML stuff at you, I'd like to show you how the web is actually structured so you understand that. So first of all, this looks sort of overwhelming. And if you have questions, it's a good thing to always like ask them early and don't feel like it's something that you should have known, because there are words that you think that you sort of understand, like what is an element, what is a container, but you might not exactly know what I mean by that. But I'm so much into this that I might not even notice that it's obviously that somebody didn't understand it completely. This can happen, and don't ask it like 3 classes later, because then you might have missed a lot of stuff that you could have cleared up very easily. And it's not just you, it might be anybody else in class. So it would be nice of you to ask the question for everyone else. But I don't expect you to remember every little single bit, because even I have to go back to Google to see like how was this done exactly, because there's so many there's things that are confusing. So it's asking for this hypertext. It's a piece of text. It's requesting this information. That's the protocol it's asking for. It could also be the HTTPS, which stands for secured server now, and Google needs ranks these HTTPS things higher. Pretty much all that means is if you have a shopping cart, the information is more secure. Not quite sure how they make it more secure, but the latest thing is to have the HTTPS. The S is a security certificate called SSL. So the subdomain it's looking for the web, and it's going to display it on a browser. So there's a next information for it. And after these 3 www, there should actually be a period between that and the URL. And that domain is the name that you bought. It is hosted like a telephone book entry, if you know what a telephone book is anyway. This generation might not. So the URL is what you bought, and it doesn't have to be on the server that you host your files. It's just that's a place where you bought the name and you registered it, and it's the DNS, the domain name server. And it could be .com, or it could be .net or .biz, and there are a whole bunch more, and they keep expanding that into bigger extensions as well. The URL is your name. And then it's sort of like a tree structure on that server. There is first you go automatically to the index.html. Index. Could be a different extension than HTML. Could be also PHP, or I'm not sure if there are other ones. But the index is sort of the main file that if you don't specify looking for another file, this is where it automatically by default goes to. And then there could be folders inside your server, and sort of a tree structure where it goes down from folder to folder to folder. Every time you put a /, it goes into the next folder. That's another reason why you don't want to have // in your names, for example, because that could be confusing for the server. So that's the file path. Then the extension of your file at the end will tell will tell what kind of file that is. It could also be a mail server that it's asking for, so that wouldn't be able to display on a browser So that would be used as your mail setup on the computer. And they have POP or IMAP. I'm not going to get so much into these details now, but they're just to let you know that there are two different kind of ways to receive your mail. So the DNS, like I said, is the domain name server. It's sort of the telephone book that tells the if there's somebody asking on the web for this URL on this domain name server, there is a number that will send it to the IP address of your server. Pretty much you have an A record, it's called, and then this just like redirects all your requests onto the server where your actual files are hosted. Like here, there's a folder with a bunch of files. It's a hypothetical folder, obviously. It's not a real folder. Like everything on the web is digital. We know that. So in the folder, there could be HTML files, which are the files that the browser is looking for. And they could be using CSS files, which are sort of design rules that are used for the HTML. So they're linked. There could also be JavaScripts that add a lot of functionality to the coding stuff. And you have images as well. There could be a whole bunch more other things, like they forgot on this graphic here, the font files, for example. And there could be fav icons, those little icons that the apps are using. And the FTP server is where you're hosting those files. The FTP is File Transfer Protocol, and it's a program that you use to copy the files onto the server. And the browser is necessary to display this information. Before there were browsers, you couldn't really see these formats. It would just be a text file, but it wouldn't really look very much. You couldn't really design much on that, right? And so the front end is the browser, what you see in the front that's display with your interface. The back end, it's what's happening when you're, let's say you're on a shopping cart, you're putting things in the cart, it adds that to a database and inputs sort of information that it holds, and then it spits out another generated code because you're booked that room and so on. This is kind of the back end process. There are a content management system, CMS, that people talk about when they use WordPress or Drupal or Squarespace or Wix. They're sort of like editors where you can edit the text and then it will go through a template and will display those blocks on a website. Those are called the content management systems, and they're using quite often what's called WYSIWYG editors. Is what you see is what you get. Sort of like this example here is a Google site where you just drop in the different templates. They have sort of setups of layouts that they already give you. These are great for making a quick web page, but in the long run, you still need to know the code to go into behind this and change it to what you want to, like if you want to, your designer, so you can want to improve this and make so there's a layout that's not like everyone else. It's not like the cookie cutter Squarespace template that everyone else has. So if you want to stand out a little bit differently, then you need to know the code to build it yourself. And it's really not that hard. And in the next clip, you're going to see how a basic HTML structure works. In the future, I'm surprised that there haven't been more WYSIWYG editors like this, like when you have Photoshop and Illustrator or InDesign, where you just click a button and say, make this a web page. But that's just not really like the way it works, because if you're designing a static page, it's not interactive. That's the part that you need to program in. So far, there hasn't really been the perfect solution. There are many, many different new programs that you use, and all the time they keep changing, so nobody knows everything, but it's also kind of exciting that it's still working. We can still decide how the next tool will be designed. It's pretty much up to you too. All right, thank you.